Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmere Connections. We're a collective of book-loving nerds rereading Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere series. From book 1 to book 16 million, we'll be uncovering every secret connection there's to find. Today, we are joined by Swiggity Swoo.
Eidos domai, you conniving rulos. It's good to be back.
You can't use that language.
You just
That
won
was
Elantris.
spot on. That was so good.
He's the
such a-
best. He's my favorite.
John.
How could I top that? I'm just along for the ride now.
Okay.
Yeah, yep, I don't know what to say either. I'm very impressed at your accent.
His voice is my favorite. Like, we'll get into it.
Oh boy. And I'm ReaderWarrior. I have not listened to the audiobook, so I don't get this at all. And today we're going to be finally living up to our potential as Cosmere Connections as we leave the Mistborn planet to go to Elantris, where we will be covering Mistborn Elantris' Prologue, as well as Part 1, The Shadow of Elantris, Chapters 1, 2, and 3.
For the record,
And-
that means we are leaving Scadrial and going to Cell, I think? Cell.
So, we
S-E-L.
will not be... Yes, we're not going to discuss any Mistborn spoilers except in the spoilers section. So, we're treating this as any viewer could just... I'm starting with Elantris, so I'm going to come to this. So they don't need to read Mistborn in order to understand this season. There will come a point when we start doing books, probably after Era 2 and Front Half Stormlight, where we have like the law of Cosmere connectivity or something, where at this point you need to have read the other books. I'll come up with a cooler term in 4 years when we get to it.
In 4 years? I think it might
Yeah,
take
probably
longer than
longer.
that. You're optimistic about that, reader.
Yes, I am.
The law of
And-
Cosmere connectivity sounds kind of cool.
It does actually work pretty well.
It does. Yeah.
Before we start the episode, though, our birthday happened again. We are now officially 2 years old.
Wow, it's hard to believe.
We
It was only yesterday I manically posted in a Facebook group, thinking we would have time to read through all 6 Mistborns before the last medal came out.
that went out in like 2 episodes. But
Right.
to quickly go over some numbers, we have achieved a total watch time of 295 hours, which is just over 12 days, as opposed to the hours of 92 hours, 22 minutes, and 41 seconds that we posted this year, which is just 4. So that's a 300% increase. Which we added 48 hours to last year. Wait, I'm lost. Okay, so in total we have posted 92 hours. We posted this year 48 hours.
So you could listen to us for weeks on end, if you really wanted to.
Barely a week. If you wanted to binge it.
Wait, no, you're right. It's
Um,
only like 2 days, really. What am I thinking?
We have reached
I'll edit
59
that.
subscribers as time of birthday and have achieved 3,842 views. These are all YouTube statistics. I could not get Apple or Spotify statistics. But ta-da.
Uh, so,
Like, now
because
onto
the
Elantris.
prologue is super duper short. Don't look at me like that. Yeah, fat. Don't do that. No.
Fine.
We're all
So
shy.
because the prologue is super duper short, and there's a really kind of charming story in a part of the book that we tend to, or at least I as a reader tend to kind of gloss over, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the foreword as well. So, and specifically the 10th anniversary foreword, which was written by Brandon's good friend and longtime colleague Dan Wells.
Who
he
is
tells a
now
story.
part of the Dragonsteel.
Yes. Well, I mean, they're still colleagues. I mean, you
Yeah.
know.
You guys
Uh,
ever listen to
They
the
host a
podcast they
podcast
do?
together.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have off and on. It's good, but I always get stuck going, I'm gonna do the writing prompt, and then I get like a list of like 30 of them that I never even touch, and then it's like, crap, I need to pause this for a minute, and then I lose my list, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll just go back to the podcast. Yeah.
Is there a
So-
writing prompt? Wait, what's the writing prompt thing?
They have a writing prompt one that they do with others, I believe. I think me and Swiggity were thinking of intentionally blank.
Blank.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Oh, I was thinking of the other one that he does with Mary Robinette's whatever, and they rotate a few other people out, writing excuses.
Writing
That's the name of
excuses.
the podcast. And they give, at the end of every episode, they give a writing prompt, kind of loosely based around what their topic is. And they give topics, like the topics of the podcast are about, you know, tips for improving your writing and stuff like that. Really good stuff, and it's short format. I think they try to keep it under 15 minutes. Something like that. Yeah, the slogan is we keep it short because you don't have lots of time and we're not that smart, which is obviously just silly. So, anyway.
It's the opposite of
back
what we
around.
do. Yeah, here.
So Dan Wells talks about in his foreword the early days of writing in a writing group with Brandon, and how he would write these stories about, you know, the main character goes to this school of magic and they're trying to shut it down, and everyone in his writing group is just waiting for the, you know, Earth destroying bad guy to show up, so that the guy who studies at the school of magic can use that magic to save the world, and then everybody's happy and it saves the school and yay. And Brandon's like, that's not gonna happen, that's not how the story is gonna go. And they're like, but who's the bad guy, you know? So they talk about that a little, or Dan talks about that a little bit, and he moves on to talk about how when Brandon finally gets an agent, and you know, this guy comes into the writing group a little bit, and he's like, no, you have to imperil your world. And he's like, but fantasy can be about anything, why can't it be about this? Imperil it now. So that was kind of funny little anecdote there. But then it moves on to Brandon's next work that he submits, and it's this sweeping tale called The Spirit of Adonis, and it's full of exciting things like life-ending curses and indomitable armies and sweeping magics and intimate stories about lovable characters on the smaller scale, and how, you know, he kind of combines those two things together to make this great story that none of the people in his writing group could really put down. But the only problem was nobody could really get their head around what it had to do with Adonis. And Brandon says, well, the city is called Adonis. Is that not clear? And the whole writing group is confused about it. And they're like, well, is it on Earth? Is it in Greece? And he's like, no, why would it be in Greece? And then they tell him, well, finally somebody steps in and they're like, Adonis was a figure in Greek mythology. And he's like, oh, I completely forgot about that guy. I knew that name was too good not to have been taken. I will change the name. Which, that little story made me chuckle. But then the next week they had the Spirit of Elantris for the next chapter of the book, and eventually it just became Elantris, which I thought was a funny and appropriate little tale about the beginnings of what Elantris was as a work of fiction, as well as kind of, you know, because we're beginning Elantris, right?
Mhm.
There was one more touching little thing that I want to share right at the end. Dan talks about in his home, he has something that he believes will someday be the most valuable things he owns. And it is a first printing of Elantris, signed by Brandon, with the attribution for Dan, my first signed book ever. Brandon Sanderson. How cool is that? Is that not just like the coolest little, like, awesome?
That is
awesome.
extremely
Yeah.
touching.
Right? Like, I almost cried when I heard that the first time. I was like, oh, that's so cool. So
I almost
Now that
got
we've
choked
gone
up
through
when
the
you were
forward.
saying it just now.
right? Like it's like right in the feels. So moving on to the prologue. Elantris was beautiful once. It was called the City of the Gods because of its beauty and the glow of the city, literally glowing with magic. The people who lived there were beautiful as well, with white hair and almost metallic silver skin. They could wield magics, not wheel, with the wave of a hand, and they were said to be immortal. People came there from across the continent to receive healing or barter for goods, and anyone could become an Elantrian. The Shaod would take them, and they would move to Elantris, starting their new lives as gods to live for eternity and rule in wisdom and whatever else they ruled in. Robes, probably. Until eternity ended 10 years ago. Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
There you go.
So
Doesn't
that's
get better than that.
What a wind-up pitch, man. Just
I love
Yeah.
how it's
till
just
eternity
it's
ended.
world building from the very start. And this one, the
Mhm.
prologue is just like telling you what's up.
Right?
It's the most narrative Brandon has been so far. Like, this is the opening narration to a movie.
Yeah.
It kind of is
In
like
a
the
world.
play, you know, like yeah, so do it again.
In a hole in the ground.
I also, in my notes, I just had quoted, "Eternity ended 10 years ago." Like, that is... Tell me you're young Brandon Sanderson without telling me you're young Brandon Sanderson.
Anything else on the forewords / prologue?
No, that's it. I just thought it was a little piece of joy.
It was. I kind of disagree on, like, I've seen Doctor Who named a whole alien species after a Shakespearean character. Why can't they name
Because
a
Doctor
city?
Who is meant to be a little bit campy, and this is clearly
That's
not.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's a big difference between the tone of the two works.
That's true. But also, I liked in the foreword at the very end, like he says, in 100 years, a little up and coming author will name their book after Brandon, and that's when he'll know he really made it.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it is kind of a darker book, though. Like, I guess from the prologue, you can't really tell so much, but without spoiling explicitly, this book is kind of dark, right? Like, I
Yeah.
specifically remember at the end.
There has to be
Yeah.
darkness for light to shine through.
Yeah.
Yep. But also, like, the narration, and then the screen just goes black, and then eternity ended 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Although, now that I'm thinking about it, it does kind of share that element of the bad thing already happened, like in Mistborn, the bad guy won, right? Like we had the Lord Ruler won, and this was
Yeah.
the society he created. Well, now the bad thing happened. Eternity ended. We don't know how yet, but it ended. And now we're here in the aftermath trying to figure out what's going on.
Yep.
So there's some similarity there. I wonder if that's like a stylistic characteristic that we will see continue through the rest of Brandon's works. Stay tuned.
It also kind of does the job of, like, you're reading this book and all you know about it so far is that it's called Elantris. And so you're reading it and you get to picture Elantris as it was first, the magic, the high society, and then you hear that it fell. If you started the book and it was already fallen, I think it would have kind of a slightly different effect. Like, if that's your first hearing of it as being fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Where it's like, because you get to see it as it was, it kind of makes you feel even like it makes you feel more for Elantris and the fact that it did fall.
Even in
Versus
just a
what
few
it is.
paragraphs, right?
Yeah.
And, like, we do hear in, like, the later chapters from, like, Reread, like, how they described it previously, but, like, here we're getting an unbiased narrator here's what it was, and we can trust that typically. Whilst Raoden has, 10 years, he was a child back then, or at least 10 years younger, and he doesn't have it a perfect memory, and so he is a little bit biased by what has happened to it.
Which is so different from Mistborn, where the crazy thing happened like 1,000 years ago. It is in the distant past.
Clearly, in between the two novels, he's upped his time scales a little bit.
So should we move on to chapter 1?
Yeah.
All right, that one was me. It's weird not having epigraphs to read.
Yeah.
Kay's having a little party over there.
So in this chapter, Raoden wakes up and eternity seems to have ended for him as well. He, is extremely hungry, which is weird for him, and it's for some reason it's like taking forever for his food to come, to the point where he's like calling out for people, which like I wondered if that was something strange. Like, does it always take long for his food to get there, or was this something that happened just today? Because like later on, Sereni is kind of questioning things like at the funeral and all this. So I have this theme in my head of like, is there something going on with Raoden? And anyways, even down to the point of me questioning like the breakfast, like, whoa, why did it take so long? But that's not the point of this chapter. The point of this chapter is that he wakes up and finds out that the Shaod has happened to him. He has the black splotches all over him and has become what the Elantrians have become, which is tarnished. And so there's a little bit of a time skip to him being chucked into the great city, and basically given like a well-wishing basket of like wine and meat and told to kind of fend for himself. I just wanted to pause if you guys had anything to add.
How do you guys pronounce it? I pronounce it Raoden.
That's the way I've always pronounced it as well. Raoden.
Okay. Because in this book specifically, pronunciations are important.
Yes. If you're reading the physical copy of the book, if there are two vowels next to each other, you pronounce them independently of each other when reading, specifically for this book.
So, like how Raoden's name has R-A-O, you wouldn't say Raoden, it would be Rao.
Yes. I believe he said like the first two vowels are strong, the next ones are weak or something. That's why it's Raoden, not Raoden.
Then it's supposed to be Elantris, not Elantris. I think I said Elantris earlier.
I feel
it's
like
supposed
that
to be
one's
Elantris.
less critical in its pronunciation.
A-N is also kind of a weird...
But
A-N is kind of like difficult to say.
The big one is like the Shaod. It's
yeah. Also, you have to roll your R's. Elantris.
Also,
not Shoud.
and Diane.
Shahalud.
We don't know who that is.
So anyways, he wakes up, he's got the Shaod. they chuck him in Elantris. It's not looking good. It's a slimy, grimy place there. He looks over and sees what he thinks is an old man, but it's actually a 16-year-old boy, but he's just so decrepit and weak that he appears to be ancient, and he begs for food out of mere habit, and it's, the hopelessness on his face breaks Raoden's heart as he realizes just the filth that he's been subjected to. Quickly, it gets worse as 5 dudes come into the courtyard he's in and try to steal his food. He he chucks the basket and gets away. I think it should be noted that he gives some food to the boy, which is cool. I like Raiden. He's a good character.
Yeah, they.
He
I'll say that.
does give some food to the boy, but then the boy immediately gets beaten to a pulp.
They target the boy because he was given food. And
Yeah.
Brandon did like a really good job of like showing that Raoden's a good character, because when he's talking about like the shield coming for him, he's not, even though he's like the prince character, he's not like, I'm royalty, I shouldn't be doing it. He says he thinks like probably what general things would happen. It happens to people who are bad, who are cursed, not to good people. He doesn't view it as like a class thing or lesser people. It's just, it's not gonna happen to me, not for any specific reason.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. I wonder about that because I didn't read it like that. I do like that reading of it, but I guess in my head I was just thinking of him more of him just being so detached from like kind of like any tragedy that could happen to you, of like, oh, that happens to other people, like you would never expect to get into like a car crash or something like that, like
But I'm
but
saying
like
like
actually the idea that it happens to like bad people, like, is that something people believe in this universe?
possibly.
I
But I'm like
think
saying he doesn't like put down the people it does happen to, is what my comment was mainly getting at. Like he wasn't saying like, oh, only peasants get it, or
Yeah,
unsavories.
and I like that too. So after he gets away from those guys, um which is disgusting, they're like lapping up the food off the ground, like it's nasty, and he can understand why, because he's hungry too, and it's not going away. His pain's not going away. He stubbed his toe, and that seems to be eternal. He stumbles upon this Duladel man named Galadon, who is another character I just adore. And
Cola?
I don't even know what to say about Galadon. Like, he's just so like friendly and cool and knowledgeable. Like, and maybe it's
And
just
dour.
yeah.
He's
I
a
don't know
fun
about you guys,
pessimist.
but the audiobook reading of him is just amazing and super cheesy, and I love it.
The graphic audio version is much better, though, in my opinion.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, it. They give him like a. I don't know specifically, but it's like a very kind of tropical sort of accent. Almost. I don't really know how to describe it, but he's definitely got like a equatorial region kind of accent in the way he speaks, and it makes so much more sense with the way that you read the doulas as being described. Like, it just, I don't know, it jives very well in my brain. And when I switch to the regular audiobook, it's jarring. It is jarring.
Yeah, it's super it's super old school to me. Like, it has these really old school fantasy vibes. And it totally has a different feel, especially when you get into like the Prathan POVs.
Yeah.
It just feels it totally totally old school. I can't even describe it any other way. So Galadon seems to know a lot about Elantris. He tells Raoden that they're undead. Even if he were to completely destroy the boy, like, who Raoden kind of wants to put out of his misery, they're not sure if his soul would disappear or what would happen to him, but the only way to even come close to that would be to completely eradicate every molecule of him, because they just don't die.
But even then, he says that like we don't actually know if that would end the suffering or if they would just continue to suffer for all existence.
He even says that some people believe that they become pain.
That's
Coral.
dark. So they decide to just leave him, which is so dark. Like I was saying, this is a dark book.
I mentally
Red
called the kid Carl in my head.
Carl.
Why?
Carl!
Carl.
All I know is it has something to do with The Walking Dead.
Oh,
I've seen the memes, not the show.
I'm just, every time there's a background character with no lines that has no name, I'm just gonna like assign a Walking Dead name to him.
So, being the new kid in class, Reardon wants to ask Galadon for some help, showing him around the campus. And he offers him some meat. Galadon is impressed that Reardon knows how to speak some Dula, and they become fast friends. Galadon accepting the offer in exchange for 30 days of basically showing him around Elantris. Yeah, that's chapter 1.
Wasn't that difficult to guess what the words meant, right? I mean, context clues were there.
I mean, yeah. And he outright translates
Sule
Sewell
into
as friend,
that was
yes.
Suli. Suli into
No,
friend.
it's Sewell. Sewell.
All right, you conniving Rolo.
That's the one I didn't get, but I'm pretty sure I know what it means. Like, it gets really dark from the start. Like, they go check up on the kid, and you can see, like, the vertebrae, or he's, like, cracked open.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not quite bleeding. It's like there's, like, the blood's just not moving.
Yeah, let's talk about,
feels-
Oh, go
He
ahead.
feels his heart, and, like, there's no beating, so therefore no blood is pumping.
Sewell, I told you, we're dead.
What about just, like, the visual imagery of, like, this tarnished, sludgy kingdom?
Yeah, did you mention the sludge at all? I'm not sure if you did.
I don't think I did, but it's covered in sludge.
Yeah, the city is covered in, like, a brownish, blackish,
Brownish?
greenish slime.
Yeah.
Like, everywhere.
I always saw it like a sort of neon green.
They describe it as being somewhere between the pitch black and dirty sewage. So
Actually, there's a really good line for how they describe it. It's... Oh my god, it's such a good line, actually. But-
getting green from? It might just be like the sewage line, and in my mind, like comic, like cartoon,
The
Saturday
slick...
cartoon
Nuclear
sewage was
waste.
always like green. Yeah, exactly. It's got that glow to it.
The slick, oily substance had an equalizing effect on Elantris' colors, blending them all into a single, depressing hue, a color that mixed the pessimism of black with the polluted greens and browns of sewage.
Yeah.
So pretty much
Yeah,
the
just
most
in my mind,
delicious
it all
place
looks
to be.
radioactive. I got nothing else for this chapter.
Yeah,
There was a little tiny blip that I want to talk about because I think it is a shining example of Galadon's character. They talk about as they're talking about what happens if you like burn an Elantrian or whatever.
Ooh.
They talk about how some people would prefer an existence of suffering over non-existence altogether, and I'm like, eesh. that is some very dark, pessimistic, like just worst possible scenario. Like, way to
Yeah.
go, Galadon.
And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
Galadon, some people, maybe not the person suffering.
But his whole point is they can't make that decision for him. Like, that's,
True.
you know, and that is, I mean, you can, you have the power, but should you?
Yes.
But you shouldn't make that decision for him.
Right.
Okay, so chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
So, chapter 2, we get to meet Serene, who, is a widow. Now, she has been married and is now widowed, and has never actually met her husband in person because she was supposed to marry Raoden. So she is a princess of Teod, we find out, and she had put together this marriage contract between her and Raoden, and she had decided to come over early to surprise him before their wedding, which was supposed to take place in a week. And in the marriage contract, there is a clause that says if either party dies before the marriage happens, the marriage is legally binding. So, she now has to stay in Erelon without knowing anyone by herself. Which, honestly, poor Serenity. Like,
I've heard of getting catfished, but this is ridiculous.
Wasn't expecting a Groucho Marx impression.
So she shows up, and she has with her Sion named Ash, and which is this little glowing ball of light, that she talks to and follows her and around and hangs out with her.
She's not crazy, we swear.
So,
An ash
and
fell from the sky.
when she gets off, she hears about the fact that Raoden has died within the time that it takes for her to travel from Teod, her home country, to Erelon, which it sounds like is only like 2 days or something, but
5 days, I believe she
was
said.
it 5 days? Okay.
It's a short period of time.
Yeah.
No, give me the point. Give me the point.
That didn't take long.
I forgot to mention in my chapter, he never tells Galadon he's Raoden. He specifically leaves out his name, because
just call me Sudi.
Yeah, which I almost kind of didn't get why he did that.
Probably just because he doesn't want to be seen as the royal guy.
Yeah, I think it's because he doesn't want to be seen as the prince. He would rather
people would be like,
"Oh,
you're the guys who chucked us in here."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
Oh, but so she goes to his funeral tent, and when she's there, she's like, something's wrong. Something feels wrong about this. Like, he was perfectly healthy. How did he just drop dead?
Didn't pass the
this
vibe
doesn't
check.
make any sense. Also, why is his dad not here? Holding a vigil for his son?
By
why
the
is
way,
his dad holding court? His son died last night. This is weird. Something's wrong here. And she heads to the court. On the way, I would like to point out is that she does actually see Raoden.
Yeah.
So she doesn't know that that's who it is, but she sees a man in all white, covered in head to toe, with his hood up, being led by Karathi priests somewhere, which is Raoden being led to Elantris.
So, Raoden wakes up, discovers he's an Elantrian, the maid runs off, probably screaming, like, the prince has been taken or something. They come in, they check him out, then I'm guessing they quarantine him for a bit. If not, immediately try to put him in Elantris, right? Put him in the ropes, give him his fruit basket. But between all that time, they had enough time to set up a wake and funeral.
Yes, because they have to go through the Karathi funeral rites for the people, and also they only throw a lot. So this is something that we find out
a little later,
but they only throw people into Elantris once a day. So they wait until they find out if there are more people that need to be thrown into Elantris.
So most Likely that'll be like a midday task. I
Yeah,
doubt that's an
yeah,
early morning task. Okay, so there was.
yeah,
I
It's just
think
the
it's
way it's
actually
read. It's like
supposed to be like an hour before sunset or something like that,
okay,
if I remember right. But
yeah,
that
what
fixes it
time
for
of day
me.
is not really super relevant.
yeah.
I'll erase my point.
Um, but so she goes to, so she sees that on her way, but she goes to court, and she gets into King Iadon's court, and she's standing there, and she's waiting, and she's waiting, and she feels like she's been waiting for too long before Iadon actually, like, acknowledges the fact that she's there, and he immediately looks at her, goes, "Why are you so tall?" and then tells her to leave. Um,
In
and
so
then
many words too.
in
Like
so many words, like that's basically what happens.
it
It's like,
really is.
why are you so tall? No one told me you were so tall. And uh, wife, go take her away and go do whatever women do, like embroidery or something, or some such nonsense. Uh, and
Like
then she
imagine
promptly gets
this.
kicked out of the court.
Like
Yeah.
imagine a modern day where like Raoden has like brought Serenity home, like doo, doo, doo. They open the door to like meet the parents, and like the first thing the dad says, "You're tall."
He's Iadon, as we can tell. Iadon is not a very nice person.
No, he's like Norman
No.
Osborn in the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire. She's just the
So
worst.
But she later it calls him disagreeable, and I'm like, he's not really disagreeable. He's just a horrible person, misogynistic. But he didn't really disagree with anything.
I like the way she puts it that she'll have trouble finding allies here.
yeah.
All
Well,
she has to do is
so
look down.
yeah, she later after she so Raoden's stepmother, the queen, takes her off and is just spouting nonsense at her the entire time, and just like stream of consciousness talking, and Sereni eventually extricates herself from talking to Raoden's stepmother.
But the orange roses were fascinating.
Huh.
and
And she has
and
free access to all the horses in the
Those
stables.
windows were just
and
so big.
and she calls her dad and informs her dad about the situation. He doesn't think, he feels so bad for her. She is 25, she is very tall, she describes herself as being brusque. So she's not a very agreeable person as well. And no one in her homeland wanted to marry her. So this was kind of her last shot at finding someone to marry someone she might actually like, and she felt that she could grow to actually enjoy spending her days with Raoden.
Oh.
So she was really looking forward to it. So she's upset about it, and her dad can tell, and her dad does say, like, hey, like, if you need an out, like, we can void the contract and you can come home, like, it's okay, I'll deal with it, like, it's not that big a deal. But Sereni says no, because of the fact that she feels like there's some kind of foul play that happened with Raoden's death. She feels like there's something suspicious going on. So she decides to stick around and hang out, and she says, I have a whole new court to play with. And her dad is like, oh, they have no idea what we have released on them.
This will constitute as a war crime. That's it?
Yeah, isn't that the end of the
Okay.
chapter?
That's it.
I didn't know if
Pretty,
you were
pretty
done.
much.
Yeah, it's like that's pretty much the end of the chapter.
Okay.
They all lived happily ever after.
Okay. Quick little few things on the Aeons I want to bring up. First off, Ashy mentioned they used to be in Erelon. Seance were created by ancient Elantrians, which somehow got translated to scientist Elantrians when I was using voice to chat.
It was interesting how Ash specifically said they were only in Erelon for a brief period.
Yeah.
So does this mean that the Elantrians created them right before Erelon, like right before the fall of Elantris? Or?
No,
It says
because
ancient, so I guess.
so
I think it's
Right.
just that she was only there for a brief period.
It's just
yeah,
him.
Ash was only there for a brief period because he was created for the Teod royal line, I think. The Teod royals for them to have.
Okay.
So he was only in Elantris for a short period of time before he was given to the Teod royal line, because he's been passed down.
So he was like manufactured at the Sea-owned factory and then basically shipped off.
Yeah.
And Erelon was the docks.
Yeah.
And then you talked about her calling her dad, but the orb transforms into their phase. So many questions about this. First of
Why?
all, okay, this is my whole. I hate this in Star Wars. The holograms make no sense in Star Wars, but because there's no projectors and nothing to react to, where you can have just a head reacting to you face to face, or it could be an entire person reacting, whilst the other person is just standing looking at a tiny little thing. It makes no sense. But the seance, the heads actually kind of make sense. But like she says, "Can I talk to my father?" And Ashley is like, "Okay, one sec." Does he like over in Teod? Does like the other Seon there just like start vibrating and be like, "Sorry, you've got a call," or is there like a
Yeah,
can he
it
like
says
set a ringtone?
so he contacts the other Sion that's with her dad and says and tells the Sion, hey, like she's trying to talk to you, talk to her dad.
So
So
is it there's like
Sion in Erelon tells her dad, hey, Serene's is trying to contact you, and
but
he's
does
like,
like the
okay,
other
like
CO like does like I'm trying to explain how I'm envisioning this. Is it like a phone line where they're like telling, "Oh, you're getting a phone call from this person," or is it like, "Oh, in this nether space where we all exist,
We should
Ashley
talk
just
about
told me she wants to
that.
talk with her dad."
We should talk about that part of it in the spoiler section.
Yeah, I'm just my confusion is great, but also like the dad's like, "Wait, I'm gonna want to tell your wife. I'm gonna want to tell my wife about how you killed off the prince before you even got there." So, like, if the person leaves, does the head stay even though they aren't
no,
looking into the seance, or does like a
no,
screensaver show up?
no, it
Probably
goes
goes back
back
to a ball,
to
right?
yeah, it goes back into a
But
ball.
but the call is happening.
No, the call has ended
There's
But
at
he's
that
like
point.
going off to go get somebody. He's like put
No,
the phone
he's
down to go
no,
get somebody to bring them
he's
over.
not going off to go get somebody. He's
This
gonna
is
tell
This
the
is why
mom about it.
in the notes channel, Rosemary was like, CO and screensavers when.
Let me go get your mother. She'll want to speak with you. Then after a moment he chuckled, continuing, "She's going to faint dead when I tell you you've already killed off poor Raoden." So like he's setting the phone down to go get somebody. It's like a
Yeah,
landline.
so it would go back
What's a
to
landline?
it would go back to Ashes to the
Like
circular Sion,
it
and
just
then
starts
not
spinning every
necessarily.
3 seconds.
It doesn't have to be that. And we'll talk about it in the spoiler section because you need some pretty solid understanding of realmatics to get this.
Okay.
But it is worth, it's
Um,
worth noting how interesting, like,
It is
this
interesting and will.
this is, right? I like it in the book when I was first reading it, and again, it's just kind of cool to have right off the bat something so magical.
there's gonna be
Yeah.
a lot of spoiler talk this book, I can tell. But also, like, there's this one part where Serene's talking about, "Oh, Raoden seemed like such a complex person to talk with," and I'm like, that's just Brandon patting himself on the back by saying he's written a complex character. You can't get away with that.
I think he already has.
He
Dang
was
it.
so deep, and he resisted the call to adventure, and he had clearly defined motivations.
Anything else for chapter 2 besides my confusion on Sions.
I love Sereni's dad,
He was
especially after seeing Iodine. Just like, what a breath of fresh air when he gets on there and he's like so comforting and he's offering to avoid the contract and everything.
I will go to war for my daughter.
And then it puts you on the side of Team Teode as well.
Yep.
Oh, I forgot to mention in this chapter, I think it's mentioned in this chapter, is that part of the reason that they needed that, did they tell why?
Yes, they did.
It, is that Fjordell is starting to become more of a threat. So that is why Teode decided to form an alliance with Erlon.
It's a good segue.
Speaking of Fjordell,
Mhm.
Chapter 3. Harathan, a high priest figure of the Dorethi religion, has come to save Erelon. He has 3 months to convert them, or they'll be killed. He steps off a boat and into Kei, and his blood-red armor draws the attention of everyone. Like, that's an imposing. That's like old fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First ed stuff.
Like
That's what I was trying to get at earlier.
You can hear, like, you can see the plank fall down and just hear clink, chunk, clink, and you just see like the bright red boots and like, yes.
With the exaggerated jagged lines of his blood red armor.
It's
See,
like
now I'm picturing the
jagged.
opening sequence to Final Fantasy XIV. Which nobody else is gonna know that. That's fine. That's the
Somebody
animation
will.
style I'm picturing this whole thing happening. Is the plank falls down and he just strides quickly across and then points in his blood red armor.
Yeah.
You there! Get me my stagecoach.
What's weird to me is, like, I don't think they ever mention a helmet. So either you have to read this that he's wearing a helmet constantly and no attention is ever drawn to it, or he just doesn't have a helmet.
I was picturing that either he
feel
didn't have a
like-
helmet or he had like a helmet like held under his arm or something. I don't know. That was
Yeah,
He's probably got, like, a
I feel
head
there's a scene
circlet.
where he puts the helmet on a desk at some point. But
I
I
don't
could
remember.
be thinking of something completely
Ooh.
different.
To sound
I
familiar.
also wasn't looking for, but I would think like it would be drawn more attention to it if like he
Why?
was wearing this. Well, if he, like I'm saying, if there was like him setting it down or something, there would be a line about it. But also, like, this character doesn't seem to be the one to have it on like under his arm. Okay, sorry, searching under his arm in a casual thing. He would have it on 24/7 if he could.
This is the way.
Exactly. This is what.
Yeah, this is the guy who revels in people moving out of the way for him and staring at him. That's how it should
Okay.
be.
This is the way. Fjorn,
Did you say he's
head
Dwight?
Arteth. No, I said this is the way.
Because he kind of is Dwight.
Yeah. Dwight from
From The Office?
The Office? Yeah.
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 Prathan?
Yeah. I'm never gonna get that out of my head now.
Or maybe,
I see it in characterization, not in visual.
no. Just his fervor. Maybe the
Bjorn.
other guy. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Fjorn, Kei's head Arteth, greets Harathan and leads him to a carriage. The pudgy and balding man talks to passerby, much to Harathan's disappointment, until they reach it and later arrive at the red Dorethi Chapel. Really starting to like this guy's aesthetic. Harathan tells Fjorn to assemble his priests, and he goes to do so, leaving an annoyed Harathan to overlook the social area now surrounding the church. When Fjorn returns with his priests, Harathan, in Fjordalian, just Fjordell, it says, but that doesn't sound right, tells him the Wern has ordered him to take his boat and return to Fjorden, and that the Wern has ordered Harathan to take over instead with Yada's blessing. A lot of words we don't understand there.
I just have to, for whatever reason, just now, as you were explaining this and saying his name, in my brain I'm going, hooray then!
Thank you for sharing that.
Hooray! He's just celebrating. Like he's got all this armor on, he's so brooding all the time, but inside he's just like, yeah! It's like, oh shoot, what was the one anime? Overlord? Where like, it's this big skeletal guy that always has to pretend to be like super serious and dark the whole time, but inside he's just like this 16-year-old kid who's just like, I didn't mean to say it like that.
Yeah, it is confusing though, right? There's like all these different countries. Jadeth is someone you don't know, and Wern is someone you don't know, and Fjorden is somewhere you've never been.
Yeah. The brief little line about the church being turned into a social area is very Christian and Catholic, because there is a part of the Bible where Jesus goes to the temple and finds it filled with people selling stuff, and it is turned into this sort of, the word escapes me, bazaar. Just thinking of the modern one. Market.
Ma. Okay.
Market.
Walmart.
It's turned into a Walmart, and like Jesus kind of like overturns and gets angry. So this is a very direct parable to that. After removing all the unnecessaries from the church, the object, not the people, Harathan looks down at a scroll.
I mean, he
I feel
also
like I had to classify.
he also
Yeah, you probably
picked
also
out
did
the
that. But,
unnecessary people.
but that's not what I meant when I wrote it. Harathan looks down at the scroll, barely able to touch it, when Fjorn enters. He begs for forgiveness and apologizes. Harathan tells him to seek forgiveness in their homeland, and he should never have second-guessed their god, Yadeth, or Jadeth.
Jadeth.
Got it.
Audiobook says Jadeth.
Yeah.
I like Yadeth.
The graphic audio says Yadeth. And it just sounds
We have
better
a divide.
in my opinion.
I
Jadeth.
lived in Southern California for like 10 years. I do J is silent constantly. He then tells Fjorn to read the scroll, and the priest remarks that it is from the Wern himself. This isn't just a letter, it is scripture. So we learned that the Wern is basically the Pope figure. I don't know any other religious examples of what would be. I'm going based on knowledge, so I apologize if I'm. Yeah.
But like an eminent religious figure who directly, contacts God.
Yes, the top of the church.
Mm.
Fjorn reads it and admits that its orders could not be ones he could fulfill. Harathan tells him to go to Fjordell with his blessing, and he gives him a letter. In it, Harathan says there is still hope for Fjorn in their faith. The priest then leaves, and Harathan burns an identical one that would have condemned him instead. See, apologizing is always the right thing to do.
When in doubt, beg for forgiveness.
It's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. Although the virus has been removed, there still requires much attention to return the church and its teachings and servants to the Fjordell way. Harathan is currently looking for a new head Artith when Delof enters. And he's having interviews, and he's like, next one, come in. No, you're not what we're looking for. Beard.
I'm sorry, you're fired.
Big red X. You're not just the next grade Artith.
No.
I can't come up with these on the spot. Okay, so Delof enters. He's an Aurelian with tremendous Yadethian fervor. The Zealot, Harathan's word, explains how he was converted and ended up back here. And he curses the Elantrians and says that Fjorn made him an Artith, something that only someone of a higher status of Artith should be able to do. Harathan, being a Gjorn, I hate the word so much, notices the intensity in Delof's eyes and makes him a full Artith, because he's able to give him a rank of something lower than him. Then, realizing he might need to keep Deloff on an even shorter leash, Hrathen makes him an Odiv. It was effectively a slave contract. Hrathen tells Deloff to follow Fjorn and kill him if he tries to escape. Then, while alone, Hrathen rereads Yadeth through words hand scripture. It says that he has 3 months until holy soldiers will come to kill all the heathens. The time has come for the Fjordell Empire to retake the world, and only Erelon and Teod remained. Possibly why Serena was in Erelon. Hrathen had come to save them from their arrogance and disdain of his faith, as well as the armies that were coming to kill them all. There we go.
Ta-da!
So it looks like Hrathen does have a helmet, but I don't know if it's ever specifically stated. It wasn't stated in this chapter at all, so we'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Where's Waldo for a helmet?
Can we get a Hrathen's
My
helmet
kingdom for a helmet.
channel in the Discord, please?
Keep an eye out for that.
Where do we start with this chapter? I liked how the first line echoed the last line. He was like something about him being their savior.
Whether they want him to or not.
Right. And at first you don't know exactly what that means, and then you find out like why, and it's really twisted.
Either they're gonna get saved or they're gonna be dead.
Yup.
As it turns out.
But it also raises like a ton of questions, like who's this Jadeth guy? Why don't they like Elantris? And how has Kai resisted all this time?
Also, it kind of shows like the faith is not, I don't want to say nice, but it's very strict, both in how Hrathen acts and also like Fjorn was very much talking to the people, like going to like Sunday dinners and like doing activities and having festivals, and Hrathen's like, no, none of that.
Yeah,
Here
And it's also very
preach.
martial because we have a fairly high-ranking priest, or so we're to assume, based on how he can just walk into the temple and take over. And his holy regalia is a suit of armor.
yeah, and Fjorn did not want to go back.
Yeah. And he was very surprised when he heard that Hrathen was going to be staying there to take over the church. Like, this is a very unusual thing to happen.
He said, sorry, dude, corporate.
So, at which point do you think Hrathen decides which letter to give him? Is it when he apologizes, or is it when he because why else would Hrathen tell him, hey, read this, letter written with the hand of God, other than as like a test? And it's when he admits, like, no, I could never do this. You're the right man for the job.
It's basically right there, because he says something along the lines of, because he accepted his relocation without
Grace.
reluctance or putting up a fight about it.
Without complaint.
Yeah.
But I feel like that could just fit into like the part where he apologizes. I feel like having him like see what would have been required of him, and if he had tried to be like, yeah, I could have done that, that would have like, okay, I know which letter you're getting.
Of course, he wouldn't have even needed the letter at that point, as it turns out. He could have just sent
Yeah.
what's his name to go kill him.
Deloff.
Deloff.
Yeah. Which I feel is
That's
just
right.
him trying to like, okay, go get out of here, Deloff. I'll give you a task worthy of this position. Otherwise, I'll just have you sweep the carpet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a little bit it is, and a little bit it's also a kind of a test to see if Deloff will do what he's told.
Yeah. That's very much what it is like a test to see if Deloff is actually going to do what he's supposed to do.
Old Dilaf. Everybody's favorite.
Anything else in this chapter set? We meet our 3 main characters. Yeah.
I enjoy the arrogance of Prathan. He's just like, I am gonna be these people's savior, and they're gonna love me.
But he also doesn't come off as arrogant. That's the thing, though.
Well, he's not arrogant. He's just like he's got a very high
This
opinion
is-
of himself. Like it's pride, right? He
Yeah.
talks about Fjordell pride as opposed to Aerilish something.
I would even call it like faith, like in a sense. Like he utterly believes this is like word of God, truth. I'm here to do this.
Oh yeah,
God
well,
has
if you had
decreed it.
seen God write scripture in front of you, you probably would be
Yeah.
too.
This is true. But like, I don't know if the Pope told me. If the Pope wrote me specifically a letter, said, "Hey, you've got to go to." I'm gonna think of a place. Northern Ireland.
Sure. Why not?
Convert them all to Catholicism. I'll be like, I don't think I would have that. Yes, okay. Or and then he's like, or we're sending in the knights again. I don't think I would have like the pride to
Sheer
like,
bravado.
yeah, to be like, yeah, I'm here to do this. Let's go. Let's kick off the troubles all over again.
I don't know if this will stay in the episode, but I just want to say it's interesting, like, having, you know, Dalinar have, like, message from God basically saying unite them. And then that's, like, such, you know, such a different take on a similar idea.
Also very different gods.
Like, completely different,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's funny, you know.
Yeah.
You see Wraith and you're like, oh god, this guy, you know, he's a maniac. But when Dalinar does it, it's super cool.
Well, Dalinar wears blue, Hrathen wears red.
Yeah, and he's also not like,
One's a good guy color, one's a bad guy color.
he's also not like, hey, it's totally fine if you guys don't want to unite me because you'll just get slaughtered.
Do it or die, but don't come crying to me when they come knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Right.
Flamethrowers and axes.
And that is how he is. He's kind of just like, hey, it's our way or the highway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think we can safely move into the spoiler town.
Okay. Next time we're going to be covering the next 5 chapters, so chapters 4 through 8 of Elantris. Still going to be in part 1 for quite a while. But it is time to head into the spoiler realm. So if you have not finished this book, the entire series, or potentially the entire Cosmere, then we recommend that you stop here because it is likely that we will talk about everything and anything. If you are up to date, feel free to stick around because it is likely that we will bring up details you may have missed or plot threads still yet to come. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, star, heart, or whatever it is on this podcast, and don't be afraid to comment your own thoughts and predictions. You can find us at Cosmere Connections Pod at gmail.com, at @CConnectionsPod on Twitter, and we even have our own Facebook group. Check it all out. We would love to hear from you. Shh, it's Twitter.
You're gonna confuse the younglings.
It's Twitter. We'll tell them that. But if this is
I'm
where
gonna
we
tell my
must part,
grandkids this was Twitter.
but if this is where we must part, then my name is ReaderWarrior, and I have been joined by Swiggity Swoo,
Merciful Domai.
John,
We still got the shield now.
and Kay.
Have a good one.
And don't forget, there's always another connection. And we're back! Spoilers!
Hooray,
Yes.
Finn!
Yes! Okay. I know we're gonna have a lot of stuff to talk about in the spoiler section for these books. Partially because we have very few answers on a lot of them. So let's try to limit them to specific things that are tied to where they come from and recognize at a point we don't know.
I mean, really, it's the first 3 chapters. There's not going to be that much in here that there is to
Yeah.
spoil.
Okay, explain. I got quite a few questions on the Shadow.
What do you
Okay,
want to
hit it.
know? What questions do you have?
Okay. So we don't know who it picks and why.
Correct.
Also, okay,
16%?
let me pull up my notes.
Likely.
I think.
It's probably more like 1.4%.
Okay.
Or
I'll come back to like why does the Shadow happen when we get to those chapters. But like, why does the Shadow make them hungry if the heart's not pumping and nothing is being fueled?
because
So-
nothing is also being digested.
Because it's also because their body is stuck at the point in the middle of the night where when the Shaod strikes them, their body gets stuck in that transition. So I think that's partially why they're hungry, is
I like
because
Vanessa better.
Because okay, so if somebody got up and had like a midnight snack and then went to bed and like wouldn't have waken up hungry, they'd be fine.
possibly.
Probably not, though, because... Well, maybe.
Maybe.
But also maybe not.
And
We'll
why
have to
does the
read and
Shadow
find out.
only happen at night when somebody is asleep?
I think at one point, and I could be wrong about this, but because I'm working from memory, and my memory is notoriously fallible, but I think they say that it doesn't have to happen at night, but most of them do.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
Sanderson speak for it probably only happens at night, and people just haven't really thought about it.
I mean, that could be. That's very kind of meta. But maybe it has something to do with that whole, like, rejuvenation cycle. Maybe that's just the way that the original coders, for lack of a better term, who wrote the Shaod into the big Aeon that is Elantris, coded it so that it wouldn't, like, take somebody in the middle of a business meeting or whatever. It'd be much more gentle to the person being transformed.
So that implies my question of devotion didn't make this magic system necessarily then.
Devotion and Dominion were not on the planet for very long before Odium found them and shattered them.
And then he shoved them into the cognitive realm.
And shoved their powers into the cognitive. Yes.
Which bleeds over into the physical, which is why at the center of Elantris there's the perpendicularity underground, and that's where all the power is coming from.
Is it in the center?
I don't know if it's in the center.
I thought it was on the cliffs to the, west? East.
That's right. It looks like, but then why does doing the thing in the center of
What do you...
But why
So-
does carving the giant Aeon, which by the way that makes no sense, the Aeon in the center of the city cause all the powers to come from that if the perpendicularities
So
all the
the
way over
powers
there?
are not connected to the perpendicularity. The powers
But
are
I would-
connected to the land itself. So so Elantris, when Elantris, I think the creation of Elantris itself is what in a way allowed powers to work.
But I'm thinking the perpendicularity should be in the center because that's
But the
sort of a
perpendicularity
rift.
doesn't have anything to do with the powers.
But it's a
So,
rift
wait.
in.
To make an analog, you don't get the powers on Scadrial from going into the well.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that the perpendicularity is a wormhole between the physical and the cognitive. Therefore,
Far more than
investiture.
that.
Okay. Hey, we're going to be talking about that at some point. But possibly power should be spewing out of that. So it makes sense that with this open door.
Why should
Because
power be
it's
spewing out of it?
because
Why do you feel like power should be spewing out of it?
energy doesn't necessarily just remain still. It's because we're seeing that people are turning into Elantrians. I mean, the power is somehow going from the cognitive realm to the physical
power is
realm.
being fueled through the Aeon that is Elantris.
But are we basically saying that there's this giant area where devotion is, and that this one little spot, which doesn't necessarily need to be center of mass. So like imagine like a giant circle, but it could be in like a corner quadrant where somebody makes the Aeon. And it's just that's where everything's bleeding through, whilst some power can still be all the way on a different side. Okay, I gotta get a visual representation.
Think of it like this, reader. The Aeon that creates an effect is like a nozzle on a whipped cream canister.
Yes.
The shape of it will determine the shape of the whipped cream that comes out. But until you push the button, no whipped cream is coming out.
Okay.
The valve is closed.
Yes. Okay, so imagine this is Devotion's dead body and all the investiture in the cognitive realm, right? And the cognitive and the physical realms overlay each other. This could be like the perpendicularity up here, and this could be
Reader, I think
Elantris.
you're...
So it doesn't necessarily need to, it just comes from that area.
So
because there's a door open in that area.
Oh, I found it. I finally found it.
Jeez.
Oh, Cadmium asks on
thank
Wob.
you.
So, does the Shayo normally come at night? Does it always come at night? Brandon Sanderson, no. That's it.
There you go.
Okay. Brendan, I never say no. Sanderson broke his rule.
Right there.
Okay, but how long ago was that one?
2017.
More
Been a
trustworthy
while.
than the previous one.
Oh. But
Okay,
to continue with our discussion,
There was also
Reader.
one more, but I'm not gonna read it.
do you want to read it?
Don't forget to link it so we can have it on the episode.
I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Maybe I'll say it in the BTS.
Okay. But I think Raider, I think also you're assuming that it is only that devotion's power is concentrated in a specific area in the cognitive realm, which I don't think is the case. I think devotion and dominion's power have been intermingled and intermixed within the cognitive realm, and they are throughout the entire cognitive realm that correlates with cell. But they're not separate powers.
So if somebody were to set up like a repeater in a because we know the further away from Elantris you get, the weaker your access to the door gets.
But
right?
that is only because the aeons are connected to the physical space of Elantris. If you connect what you are drawing to the physical space that you are at, as we see at the end of the fourth, in the fourth Mistborn.
Metal.
the Lost Metal, as we see in the Lost Metal, when Shy, Moonlight, whatever her name is in that book, uses aeons, she connects herself to Scadrial by drawing a map of Scadrial, and she bases her aeons off of the map of Scadrial
Okay.
to be able to
Okay.
use the aeons on Scadrial.
Ooh, I just had a fun thought. So, totally tangential, but I gotta say it while it's in my brain or I'm gonna lose it. Shy makes a stamp that turns her into a Elantrian by changing her history so that she grew up there and studied all these aeons and stuff. Thereby giving herself knowledge that she never actually learned in, like, actual reality. Could you create a soul stamp that would give you access to knowledge that has never been discovered before?
I don't think so, because I think the knowledge has to have been discovered in order for you to learn it, in order for you to create a stamp that gives you that knowledge.
But
I think
what
you'd
if
be
you
better
create a
off
stamp
trying to
that
make
creates
yourself-
a history for yourself where you are a researcher doing research into realmatics, for example, and you made your
Soul
famous
stamp is
for
cheating the
having
entire system.
discovered. This
If you
is
can
so
go into enough
powerful,
detail to
you have
make it.
no idea. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay.
it's not that powerful because like yes, you can overwrite like your spirit web to some degree, but the core of you will always be the same. And I think that overwriting only has the power to block out or establish certain connections. Like there's going to be a lot of stuff that's just, you just can't, like, unless you had like so much invested there maybe.
And it's got to be something plausible enough that you would be that your soul would be able to accept the soul stamp. So, like, Shy becoming an Elantrian was something that her soul would be able to accept because she's from Cell. But, like, if she had a soul stamp that, say, made her into an Awakener, that wouldn't work because she's not from that world originally.
Okay.
And her soul wouldn't be able to accept.
Can I bring us back to Elantris specifically?
Please.
So 2 questions. Dang it, and I want to ask a question about, okay, so for her doing the Aeon on Scadrial, but Scadrian investiture is literally like everywhere. The whole planet is made out of it. What I'm thinking is maybe on Elantris, what if we're saying the investiture is all over the planet, but just this is the one little valve that's open. If they were to make
It's not the only valve
Elantris
that's open,
2,
though.
to the Elantrian door, because they get further. So if like somebody,
Oh, good, our answers
Oh,
here.
Whoa,
hello.
speaking of perpendicularities being opened.
I would say, Reader,
And your answer.
Reader, you have to
Okay.
remember the fact, I'm just gonna say this real quick. Reader, you have to remember the fact that the Elantrian magic is not the only magic on Cell.
Yes, but I'm specifically focusing on Elantrian magic at the moment. And like we know Elantrian magic gets weaker the further away. So if they were to go to Teod and like make that center Aeon there, would it act as a new conduit? And basically they can make more of these master Aeons that allow Aeon Door in more places.
Maybe.
So let me understand. The question is, could they make more central Aeons to make Aeon Door work in other places on Cell?
Yes,
Yes.
that's the
Or at
question.
least to reproduce the effects of the one that is Elantris.
Yes.
I point you to... The answer is yes. You could.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
reason, so I point you to first, Crest of the Emerald Sea, the map in the middle that is the center point of channeling power, so that way the Elantrian can use that. I then point you to
The lost metal.
the lost metal, where we have. She has to
Sure.
draw out a map of the area that they're in to centralize her power, so that way she can become a fully powered Elantrian. Those are the two
Okay.
examples that come to mind right away.
But the lost metal, the investiture is everywhere, and also I don't know if maybe someplace else she drew like a master Aeon somewhere that allows it to bleed through in that way. We don't know. But also in
We don't
the
necessarily know. She does use a jar of Aeon Door to help
that's
her.
true. She does also have a battery.
But she does also make sure that she draws a map on the floor
Of
beforehand
Scadrial.
to help focus her power. It's not
Yeah.
it's not a full it's not a fully comprehensive focusing, but again, the reason it's so powerful in Elantris is because you have the land is being focused into the city, which is being focused into the person, right? And so
Yes.
you could if you had the time, you could replicate similar effect across the various worlds of the Cosmere. Although it's interesting that you can do that, and the question is it as effective elsewhere because you don't have the two murdered bodies of gods raging around you inside of
Mm-hmm.
the right, but you're still technically accessing power through semi-cognitive and then into spiritual realm.
And by
you know
opening
that you could
new
do things like that.
and by opening new I'm just going to call them channels. If they were to open new channel Aeons around Cell, would that weaken all of it, or would it all be that powerful?
I don't think it would, because each of the power of each shard is described as being infinite in different ways. So it is an infinite power, and it's just a subset of infinity, which is itself infinity.
Or are you saying that the power would be equally if, like, they essentially set up a channel that's as effective, that's as large and in place inside of Teod, and then again inside of the Rose Empire, and then again inside of
Fjordell. Would they be all
Fjordell
getting
itself?
25%?
Are you thinking that would be the same level of power?
I think the Infinity Comet does make sense, but we also know that investiture weakens over time, and it will reach a base point.
Well, here's the thing: the whole world has the same level of investiture raging around it.
And you could argue that they already have that to an extent, because, for example, like with in Fjordell with the Decor Monastery,
Yeah.
and their access to the power that way, you have the the people who do the Chai Shan
Like
whatever
the
movement.
Threki or
I
something.
can't. No,
No, that's Game of Thrones.
The
no,
Discora monks?
no, no.
You're thinking of yes, I know what you're thinking of. The not the Shu Dareth or Shu Kessig, but the Shu.
Yeah, it's
sorry, Shu Kessig. People of the Shu Kessig, not the people of Korath or
yes.
Karathi, but
Yeah.
those of the original, the Jindoese.
Yes,
Yes,
those
that's the one, the
people.
Jindo.
Yes, the Jindo. Yes, that do
See, I
the
told you our answers were here.
that do the like martial arts movement stuff that channels
Lord Sexy
the
Pants.
power. Yeah, exactly.
But, like,
And
are they channeling pure Aeon Door? Are they channeling a combination? Great, what's a combination between Devotion and Dominion? Or are they channeling
Door,
Dominion?
not Aeon Door. Yes.
Yeah,
But
they're
they see,
channeling
but
the door.
But they also call, at one point at the end, doesn't Harathan refer to their magic as they have their own way of controlling the door as well?
correct, because it's all the door.
It's all the same.
So the door is simply the word that is referring to our two shattered shards inside of the cognitive realm.
Yeah,
That's
like
literally all it's
Stormlight.
referring to.
Roshar refers to everything as light in Surges, so like they all think it's all light.
Yeah, they all call it
when
the
there's
door.
cultivation
it's just
light.
Raging investiture.
But what I'm saying is we know there's honor light, cultivation light, odium light.
Right.
and like combinations. So are they using Aeona Devotion Door?
They're likely using, so either everyone's tapping a combination of devotion, because it's devotion and
Dominion.
Dominion.
Thank you. So devotion and minion. So it's either they're all using a combination of devotion, dominion, raging power, or I'm gonna change. I was gonna say it's probably both. I'm gonna change my mind mid-sentence. I'm gonna say they are that Aeon Door is using devotion.
And Dakor is Dominion.
using Dominion because of sorry, my brain is only half on. You have the Skaze, and then you have the what are the ones with the Aeons floating in the middle? Aishi and
The Sions.
Sions. Thank you.
Sions.
Sorry, I have the answer, but my brain's like kind of jammed right now.
And we do know the Skazy are like anti. Oh, now that's a question.
Right. So the Skazy are Dominion, and the other is of
Are they
devotion.
though?
Yes,
Well,
they
yeah,
are split.
because there's
One is
sky.
specifically tied and keyed, and the fact that we know that devotion, it's because also like the way they act in devotion versus dominion, and so the way that it's tied to devotion, that I'm going to propose that because they are basically they are splinters of devotion, but they are manifested by having Aeons inside of them.
I'm not saying
it's 100% devotion. I think
I'm saying the Skazy.
Oh yeah.
Are we certain they're Dominion alternatives, or are these anti-devotion?
No,
I think
I believe I've read something that's Skazy are Dominion.
I would lean towards them being Dominion since they're named after Sky, who is Dominion.
It's true. I don't know. Once he introduced anti-investiture, just throws everything out the window. How do we know?
Right, but you're also going to have to look at anti-investiture isn't going to be able to manifest the same types of investiture ways that it's going to be able to affect the world and essentially create surges or effects of power throughout the planet in the same fashion, because it's an anti-form of that. Like antimatter isn't able to create the same types of things as matter, so.
But we have like different properties, right?
Everything is made of has a certain amount of investiture, and so anti-investiture floating around inside of floated around air that's saturated by investiture just simply wouldn't happen. They just basically combust immediately. So it has to be some sort of investiture.
The different types of investitures have different properties, right? Like the different stormlight and void light, like will, for example, I think last longer in a gemstone, right? Void light will.
Yes, but also like, okay, to get on that thing, is it possible for a anti-investiture shard to exist? Or a splinter?
I don't think so.
The only way it could is if you were able to completely devoid an area of normal investiture.
You would have to
find
to put
suck it out of a vacuum.
Investiture into something as there is investiture inside of a shard, so you'd have to have an. Essentially, I don't see it working.
How much investiture goes into an Aeon or a
Well, you're talking about Aeon stuff, but if you're wanting to look at an anti-shard, you have an
an anti-shard would be ridiculous.
Yeah, you have an infinite amount of investiture. Then you have to get an infinite amount of anti-investiture. There's no way you could possibly collect enough, because the closer you get through a finite means to infinity, the further away infinity is. Like, you cannot accelerate to the speed of light. You must jump to the speed of light, because if you try to accelerate, you will never get there.
But also, are we saying that it needs to be a perfect harmony? So if you have like a perfect gemstone the size of my fist of honor light, and a perfect gemstone the size of my fist of anti-honor light, and you bring them together, they destroy each other, right?
Correct.
Very explosively.
Very explosive.
In a vacuum, you do the thing, ting, and then you bring the light, boom. But if you have like double the size of honor light, so it has double the amount, and you bring them together, will the honor light devour the anti-honor light, will it not even matter and all of it gets exploded, or will there be 50% of honor light left?
If it works the same way as matter and antimatter does, you would have physically remaining the remainder, right? You have 4A and 12A, or
Yeah.
wow, 8. Math is hard. You have 4A and 8A, and you subtract 4 from the 8, you're left with 4, right? So the question is, will it still be in the same form, right? Because if we do that with the antimatter, you would have a lot of gamma radiation left over.
Okay,
Right,
let's
so
get
there's
back
some
to
sort of-
Elantris.
Yeah.
I know when I peeped left like 30 seconds ago, it was because I remembered you saying, "Yeah, we're gonna keep to Elantris. We're gonna keep it kind of grounded." And meanwhile, you're
That
like,
was
"So,
optimistic.
That's me reminding myself. That's me having to remind myself and having you guys hold me accountable.
Yeah, you
Okay.
should be more specific when you say things.
Uh-huh.
in
Okay.
chapter 3, ambition was the only other emotion besides devotion that Jadith would accept."
Okay. Chapter 1. Let's go back to chapter 1. Okay, so would the teeth on to ask a very basic question, would the teeth, if that kid survived, if Carl survived to the resurrection, would his teeth grow back?
Yes.
Okay. Simple question, simple answer. And what the reason that Elantrian bodies burn better is that because they're not having any protein.
Or moisture.
What?
Yes, they
Where
would
the
have
hell did
protein
that come
because they
from?
don't have any moisture. When they get cut open, they don't have any blood that comes out. All their blood is dried
They
out.
do have No, they do have blood, it's just not pumping.
And he sees that the blood is essentially stuck inside of the veins. He can still see the vertebrae, and he's not bleeding.
Goop.
He's not gushing.
It's not that the blood is dried out, it's that the blood is not flowing.
Okay, so the blood is not flowing because it's in some sort of
Yeah.
stasis. So does it burn
Yes.
easier? Is there simply less liquid inside of an Elantrian body, and that's why it burns better?
And also, the
Is it
main
'cause the
reason
blood dust
that
doesn't
human
flow
bodies
out onto the logs, and so then the logs don't get saturated in the water, since it stays it's in a stasis and it stays where it is, so it can burn easier?
Okay, the main reason human bodies have such a hard time burning is because, and they always make it in shows, just like you throw a match onto like a pile of wood and boom, the whole body goes up in smoke, is the reason the fat cells are so flame retarded. So what I'm wondering is, if the fat cells are not getting nutrients and they're technically in a state of death, and you get the nutrients from
but-
eating.
But, reader, you're forgetting the fact that their body is in a state of stasis. So their body is not changing.
But then why did the bodies burn easier if they are still at the fat level? Okay. That was...
Because they do. There's really not a good reason for them to, other than it makes for interesting story point.
Is the sludge flammable? That's a good question too.
No,
I don't think so.
It's not, because they tried to burn stuff, and anything that's
Cook
got
it.
that on it just doesn't want to burn.
Yeah, they have to find dry wood to burn, things that are not sludged. That's specific
Anything else for chapter 1?
Good to know. When they say merciful Domai, are they talking about Dominion?
Good question. Maybe. I don't know. I never thought of it that way.
Me neither. That
Well,
makes sense.
Domai as being another name for their god, and I mean, most religions are based around some sort of breakdown of having whatever their being is. So I would say it's likely a derivation of
Devotion?
I mean, because they seem to be more of a devotion, but Domai could have been a bleeding, since they have devotion and dominion. It could be some sort of bleeding of just like the way the language developed, having those gods there.
Yeah. I can see
Yeah.
that.
But it's But it's also saying
I don't know for
merciful.
sure.
Maybe it's like asking like Satan to like be merciful.
Well,
Maybe
likelihood
it's not
is
like
you're-
saying
the way
God
the
be
linguistics.
merciful, but like
I think you're putting way too much a good and evil
Right.
assignment to these things. Neither of them are either good or evil. They are
Yes.
just
One is-
dominion.
yes, but I'm
and-
also saying like you got to see this from like a people standpoint as well, where they're arguing over a fundamental belief of what their God represents, and they
Right.
are going to warp that against each other.
Likelihood is the linguistics has developed that that people initially talked about. Oh, our God is dominion, our God is devotion, and somewhere along the way they kind of just got intermixed into one in some fashion, or pieces of one has just kind of developed linguistically. That someone like Dominion Domai is our god, and then someone else conquered someone else, and they kind of developed that language, even though they are more focused on devotion, and that just kind of became more synonymous to the word God. Likelihood that's how these types of things happen. Also, if you're looking at gods, we have autonomy is technically as a like we have the representative of the head of Shudaris currently is a piece of
An
autonomy.
avatar, right?
An avatar of
Yeah.
autonomy, not dominion in any fashion. So if you're looking at that, like how is that going to affect things? So my guess is, knowing linguistics and having studied linguistics somewhat, and like kind of like the history of that and the anthropology, it's the way
That's-
that like one language is conquered by another, and these things kind of get crossed up and mixed up. If there is a direct correlation, it's just these things became tied to the words of like deification or deity in some fashion, and there's no longer a good or bad or a happy or sad attached to it, and that just kind of became known as that word, even if it may have originally started as, oh, Domai Dominion was someone that we're against, because we've got thousands of years of developing.
Springing off like what you were saying about Jadith being like an avatar of autonomy, though, in chapter 3 there was this one line Prathan had that was just ambition was the one emotion that Jadith would accept besides devotion, and I thought that was really interesting. Like,
I wonder why.
is there something more to that line? Is that like heavy foreshadowing?
I think that
He's a avatar.
Right, well, because he's an avatar of autonomy, and autonomy really likes people that are driven to do things on their own, right? Take charge of their own self, and so that's likely where that comes from, is that
Like,
autonomy is inputting its influence into this religion.
and I was wondering if ambition was a shard as well.
ambition
Yes.
is a shard, but
Was.
ambition was shattered by odium as well, and that was the clash on Threnody.
Oh, really?
Was between ambition, odium, and mercy.
Because like I'm just having these crazy thoughts of like, what if Odium shattered ambition because he's trying to shatter the shards because he doesn't want autonomy to get control of all of them. Like, sorry, I just had like a scatterbrained
I
thought.
thought there was something recent about autonomy and Odium having worked together in the past.
Oh yeah, I do remember hearing that.
I don't remember hearing that.
But if they work together, that means he would know her plan.
I thought there was something about them having worked together.
I would
Okay.
highly doubt that because odium is very against working with having shards work together, because that was part of their deal when they ascended, was that they wouldn't essentially work together and settle on the same planet together, which is part of why he killed Devotion and Dominion, was because they settled on the same planet together. And he came across them as he was ambition.
I'm trying to find.
Hold on, I found something here, talking about. Yeah, I know. Spoiler warning. Blah 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 blah. Get out of my way. Talking about under autonomy, under Coppermind. I just searched.
I just pulled that up
with
too.
his avatar creation and alliance with Odium. Even as Taldain grew inaccessible, autonomy started to nurture avatars of herself on various worlds, including first the sun. At some point during this time, she seeded the religion of Trelegism on Scadrial. With the intent of later activating it. It is possible that autonomy aided Odium in killing Devotion and Dominion in an unknown way. The two shards appear to have some form of alliance or pact preventing them from attacking each other. Odium intended to eventually break it and double-cross autonomy, killing her off. However, he was trapped in the Shard system before that could ever happen. And our reference for that is Minicon 2021. We're going to check that. Specific words of Brandon.
Yeah. I remember it fairly recently.
Yeah. So that one's from 2021. Here the question is, race Odium was very methodical with the order in which he went after the other shards. Hypothetically, if he'd visited the Shard system all those years ago, but managed to avoid being trapped and was able to continue his mission right away, which of the known shards would have been next up on Race's hit list? Brandon said he expected ruin to implode, so he might have gone after autonomy, double-crossing them. So immediately implying that they were working together in some fashion, which I didn't know.
Can you grab that link and just post that in the?
Yeah.
Can you grab the link and just post it
to the Coppermind one or to the actual words of Brandon?
The actual
words of Brandon.
Yeah. I'll toss it in general so you can post it for readers to go take a look at that.
Thank you. Okay, so chapter 2. Oh boy, I should have known it would be this bad.
Yeah, we were talking about Sion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay, but sorry, before we do that, there's a brief little comment, the flowers. This is a thing I think is just an issue with the fact this is Brandon's first book. The potion that Baratheon has made comes out of the blue and nowhere. There's nothing in the book at all to indicate, oh, potions exist and they can turn you into things. I think talking about the flowers would have been a perfect time for saying, but don't eat one or else it'll make you look like this. Or those ones will make you look like this. This would have been a great setup for specific plants causing different ailments.
Which flower is this again?
It is when
in the garden
it's when
as Serene is getting her little tour from Queen Aesudan.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
No, not Aesudan.
Queen.
Beshi?
No.
How did we already forget it?
Ashini, I believe.
Ashini. I swear, I just read the book.
Ishin.
So the audiobook pronounces it as Ishin, but if you look at the root Aeon, I'm gonna guess the root Aeon is Ini, just like Serene's name is based off of Ini.
Yeah.
So technically,
I'm just saying,
but none of us pronounce it right anyway. I never pronounce.
I'm just saying this would have been a perfect spot to have
it
that.
It could have been
setup.
an interesting thing. It would have been nice, I think, to have some sort of piece of foreshadowing, but I doubt that there would ever be a single flower that's going to cause a type of effect, because the whole point is that he needed something that's a combination of effects. And so if you simply understand things like apothecaries and creating these types of things, they're blending multiple pieces of nature.
But
so
they could
it'd
say,
be nice to have some sort of, hey, that can make you lose your hair, but not
exactly. It makes your hair fall out.
It could have been a great
nod
to that.
Exactly.
It's come a little bit out of the blue, but at the same time, it's not to an unbelievable point after you've been seeing magic to be like, there's a dude that can make combinations of flowers, and if you know anything about apothecaries and types of old medicines, they did some weird jacked up stuff to your body. So I think this would have been a really good time. Idea of potentially doing some foreshadowing with it.
Yeah.
I love that Serene is automatically just really suspicious of this whole raid and death thing. Right off the bat, she notices, okay, this is too formal. The king's not here. The queen's not talking about it. What is going on?
So we learn later that the king wanted his son dead, or something to happen to his son, because when Sereni follows him to the thing and he's killing the girl, they see also like Raoden's name written on the walls in blood. So my question is this: Sereni calls the girl similar in description to her, minus the height. Maybe the Jezebel mysteries require a sacrifice that looks like the person. So do you think like he was killing like people that looked like Raoden?
No, because it's
Or is it just
specifically
blood
stated
sacrifice?
that they killed women, that they killed
But
the
they
maids. Like, it's
but that was
specifically
only
stated
after
that the maids have been going missing for a while, not just after Sereni started. It's been happening for a while before
Damn.
Sereni gets there.
I thought I was onto something.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Now we can get to the cell phone issue. Okay.
I would love a sea owned.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
We don't know how they're made.
We don't know how they're made, and well, okay. I don't think we know necessarily. I mean, in this book, it doesn't talk about it. First, I'm going to start researching that. Secondly, they talk about later. It's talked about. There's references to the fact that Sions and Skazi are essentially spren.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're splinters of a power, right? People don't create the spren. The spren are pieces of power that have gained self-awareness, and that's not something that any mortal can create. It's something that comes from their powers being splintered off from them, either
But we
on
also know
purpose
that the
or
Stormfather.
by accident.
But we also know the Stormfather used to. Well, Honor used to create Sprint, and then the Stormfather did so.
Yes,
By
but
showing them how to go essentially gather power into a consciousness. Again, but they're not mortal, right? It's not the mortals creating them.
But Elantrians technically
power
aren't
creating
mortals.
But Elantrians are still
Correct.
people.
Right.
But they're like the highest invested a
They're still
person
type
can
2.
get.
They're still type
Yeah.
2 invested entities, though. So
But
likelihood is Elantrians
I
never
think they
made
have
them. I don't think Elantrians ever made them.
push investiture into a ball and like right wisdom. I mean, that's what Ashley's.
No,
That's
I
what
think it
IE
happened the
is.
other way. I think the Seons existed, and that's how they learned the symbols that they could use to make the magic. That's how they learned the Aeons.
But then who? So, but we
And
know
then they based their
devotion
language
wasn't
around
even there.
Do you think the
But we know
Seons came
devotion-
before the Elantrians?
I kind of do, yeah. I'm. It's only partially like this is the first time I've considered it really, but it makes sense to me because otherwise, how would you discover to make these symbols based on your map, right? Like, and they all start with Aeon Rayo, I think, or whatever. Yeah.
But then, how did the Seons get created? Because we know that Devotion and Dominion literally just like crashed on the planet to die.
Splinters. They're self-aware splinters. Seons, just like
But
just like
okay, I know what you're saying.
Spren existed
but
before the shattering of Adonalcium.
But Adonalcium could have created them. But what I'm saying is, it's not like Honor died and there was no Stormfather or any other Spren, and then suddenly Spren appeared. Like something with a consciousness created the Spren. With Devotion and Dominion dead, and only granted, we know nothing about the planet really. Only humans.
By intention, but Spren can also be created without intention, without purposeful like interference. It takes the intention and the meaning, and they can be created. So they can. So you actually, if you're looking at Rhythm of War, we have Xyle slash
Warbreaker.
Vasher?
Yes,
Or
Warbreaker, and
maybe
he talks about how they're truly now 2 type 1, and he's talking about this that's truly 100% power gaining their own consciousness, and the way he words it is like that is power gaining its own consciousness, implying that Spren can either be formed on purpose or Spren can be formed simply by having enough power in an area with enough intention about a certain topic happening. So I
So,
but then
like
how did
there's a chance that
sorry.
Aeons just came about because of the splintering and the shattering of Devotion and Dominion.
so according to the Copper,
Thank you.
it is that Xeons were created by the splintering of Devotion. When Odium splintered Devotion and Dominion, the Xeons were created from that splintering. Is that they are bits of Devotion's magic that have become sapient. So and that's also how the Skays were formed. Similar
Okay, but that also
to
seems
similar to how Spren are created. They're similar to Spren. So it sounds like that the people on the world thought that the Xeons were created by the Elantrians. But that's not actually true. That's not the
Could
case.
it-
So you
But-
were right, John.
it doesn't say like directly, right? Like it's not like Odium, like granted metaphysically, ripped a piece of Devotion off and those pieces coalesced into Ashi or IE or
It wasn't
Rayo.
on purpose. They
Right.
weren't
Yes.
created.
Or
It's basically like
So-
when you shred a bunch of cheese, right? You get a shredder and you start shredding a bunch of fresh cheese. I've been doing that a lot lately, right? Just buying fresh blocks and you shred it. And as it's shredding and falling apart, sometimes the little flecks of cheese just kind of clump together. So
okay, but
Seons are little clumps of cheese. So,
I'm trying to figure out
That
was
metaphor
that
is delicious.
thank you.
but could it be that humans, because intent leaks out of us all the time, and with the intent of Devotion also leaking out, was it here are things people are devoted to, and that coalesced into the specific aeons?
I could see it as a way to perpetually to have more aeons created as a potential, but the fact that we have a clarification that like Seons were created by the splintering of Devotion, like when Odium traveled and killed them, like that's after they were killed, the power of shards were left in the cognitive realm and formed the door. Like the Seons were bits of Devotion's magic that became sapient. So could they have become some sapient happened immediately, and could potentially them like the door absorbing a certain amount of this cause in its mixing cause another aeon to be spat out, potentially. But I don't think it's there. I don't think there was ever, because of what we have on the Copper Mine and kind of what's talked about as them. I don't think there's ever someone that went and was like, I'm gonna go like the Stormfather, or they talk about like then Stormfather made honor spren, and some honor spren made other honor spren, right? Like my grandfather was made by my grandmother, and then they together made my dad, and then they together made me. Like
You think there's
there
any?
isn't like a little like a bunch of Elantrians sitting there be like, ooh, what kind of aeon should we make today?
Is there any
But do I
chance it
think
was like
the
a
intention
last
over time
act?
could potentially, as you have your giant pile of cheese getting mixed around chaotically, maybe another like little ball of aeon cheese is spat out again? Sure, why not? I just like my cheese analogy.
I like the
But it
cheese.
works.
I'm not
Good
hating on
point.
the cheese. I love the cheese.
But
as-
I think the ultimate idea works is that you have these pieces and they can. So I do agree with you, reader, on that they could form over time still, just not by direct intervention.
We also know this is the plot of the next 2 books, so maybe let's not spend an hour theorizing. Just wait. however many years.
Yeah, it is getting late.
I'd rather spend time theorizing
Okay.
and then re-theorize once we get more books in 3 years.
Uh-huh. Okay, anything else for chapter 2? Okay, chapter 3. Hurry for the chapter. I only got one question. If being put to a rank requires somebody of a higher rank, how does a word get set?
By
By-
Yadith himself.
Yeah.
Yadith is the only one that can call Wyrns to be Wyrns.
So, act of God chooses?
Correct.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Somebody gets struck by lightning, survives, and they're like, yep, that's Warren.
Well, I mean, they had to serve in the Fjordell Empire as in the priesthood to eventually be able to get promoted to that position, but they would be promoted by Jadith himself to that position.
Yeah. So the question is, if Yadith promotes then the Wyrn, and Yadith essentially a combination of dominion and autonomy. Autonomy is essentially the one coming down and choosing the next Wyrn.
And I'm pretty sure in order to get the position, you have to, like, impersonate somebody and beat them in a duel, like we saw in Lost Metal.
Okay. That's what I'm also thinking. What if, like, they just put, like, who's all the people who wants to be Wyrn? Okay, fight in a death match with after one wins. That's the Wyrn that Yadith picked.
I don't think we know enough to say whether or not that is the case, because we don't know. But likely it's some sort of declared act of God has picked this person as the next Wyrn.
Probably
Right,
somebody
Wyrn
who's
Because
really
in
devout, right?
Catholicism,
So
Just like,
Next time on Cosmere Connections, we're going to invent a bunch of Sportel religious ceremonies.
Well, I'm asking this because in Catholicism, sainthood can only be achieved if you complete 3 miracles and, time after death. So,
well,
like,
in Elden Ring, sainthood is
how does
achieved
one
when you're
look
stuffed
for
into a jar.
sign of God?
Sorry, it's getting
I
late.
think we've officially went to... Yeah. Okay. Anything else for this? We're probably going to be arguing this entire book because we don't have answers, unlike Mistborn.
I mean, it's also not super important at this point.
True.
not going to stop us from arguing
Okay.
about it.
I'm fair, that's what
That's
we
true.
do.
Exactly.
Because if we happen
Okay.
to stumble upon the answers first, we'll be pretty excited about it.
That's true.
Exactly.
That would be exciting.
We'll lord it over everybody.
Suck it, 17th shard.
That's right, we knew.
We do. I was the one who predicted you could snort metals.
We knew it was loose bits of cheese.
I don't know if that's a good thing, reader.
I called it. I have done it twice. I called the procreation of a shard, and I called
You've
snorting
done
metals.
it twice. You've snorted metals twice. I called it. You can snort metals. I've done it twice. Proof.
No, I've gotten Rathbo twice, and then immediately the next book has proven I was right.
That's gotta be satisfying.
But now I'm concerned. What's going to be my next question, and how quickly does that get confirmed? I gotta use these powers for good. Okay. Well, that's just about gonna cover it. Yeah. On that note, that's just gonna about cover it for this before I go mad with power. Thank you so much for joining us in our ramblings and predictions. This has been Cosmere Connections, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
That's good comment.
That's a
redo.
wrap.
What
Let's
was
only
that,
record.
John?
That's good copper. That's what I said.
That's good copper right there.
He's sitting there
Oh,
snorting
yeah.
Atlanta copper. What are you doing?
Yeah. We just. Well, what I was imagining when I asked the question is like, imagine like a mafia boss that just snorts a line of pewter, and like gets really strong from doing that
But why though?
because it
Wait,
would
so
look
when did
intimidating.
this snorting metal thing come up? I missed.
It was 2020, and I was probably rereading Hero of Ages.
I was young
Or-
and in
no, I
college.
was
and
probably
had the
rereading.
money.
Yeah. And what happened was I was reading a book, and I don't remember which Mistborn book it was, probably one of the latter three. And I was thinking, wait, does it have to be swallowed? And so I was like, and then I was thinking, for whatever reason, I distinctly remember, imagine like a mafia boss, or like a character being brought into like a pewter thug's base, and like seeing the pewter thug just like snort a line, and like instead of getting like super ragey, he just gets strong, and how intimidating that would be.
You know what?
And
That
then
would be
and
really
then what book
intimidating.
answered?
I
I
don't-
don't remember when Brandon referenced someone snorting metal.
The lost metal. Wax and Wayne breathe in
Oh yeah, breathes it in.
metal.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
because all
Mm.
that has to happen is that it has to enter your. It has to.
Enter your bloodstream.
But I'm the one who
It
asked the
also-
question.
Well, it doesn't
No,
necessarily have
that's
to
the thing,
enter
it
your
hadn't been
bloodstream,
answered.
It just
I
has to
asked
enter your
Brandon.
body.
I asked
Right.
Brandon, can it be snorted or injected? He said, as long as it gets into your body, you can burn it. I'm the one who asked the question right before.
Reader
But, I mean,
wants
we already
credit.
had some inkling.
I want credit.
because
I deserve it. I deserve
made-
that wob with my name on it.
they made a bullet out of a spike, so we had that.
In my mind, a mafia boss snorting a line of pewter sounded really awesome.
Until his nose starts bleeding and his eyes fall out of his head.
I don't
Yeah.
know. They can swallow metals
I mean,
without
typical
bad happening.
problems of someone snorting,
Right.
something into their body.
Metal
So,
shavings.
metal
Yeah.
shavings specifically.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Okay.
Great. Now I'm imagining, the thug who's got the little tracheal implant. Don't do drugs, children. It is bad for you.
Don't snort pewter.
Do we potentially need to throw up a drug trigger warning on this episode when it comes out?
Don't snort pewter.
Nah,
Trigger
don't
warning
snort
drugs.
pewter.
Remember, kids, cadmium stays in the batteries.
I used to be a steel runner, but now I can't move at all. I've also been listening to other podcasts, specifically an Elantris one, just so I can have this sort of fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
That's pretty
I went
smart.
through and-
Just like see what other theories are
Oh.
out there, you know?
Mm-hmm. And also, our weakness, although I think it's also a strength for our podcast, is we know everything that will happen and can provide, here's information you will need. Whilst the other podcasts that I'm listening to, while it's enjoyable, they are first-time readers, but typically with one person who has read. And so they'll question things that go nowhere. Like, the Cosmere reads in one of their episodes, they're questioning, oh, are Vin and Ellen going to break up? Is this going to end with them having to turn against each other? And I was like, no. Because when we got to that episode, it's like, yeah, they're just having a little tiffle. They'll make up like immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not worried about it.
Exactly. Okay.
But
So,
then
I've also
the only
got-
weakness that we have with that is whenever a red herring comes along, we always kind of have to pretend like, oh, maybe
no,
they'll
what's
die,
It's
you
just-
know?
Eh. Yeah, we believe in the setups Brandon sets up. I'm not very articulate right now.
And neither am I. We need to do some vocal warm-ups as a group.
Mommy, mommy,
Shield,
Read.
Reod. Prologue.
Oh gosh, this is gonna be a long one.
Elantris.
Elantris. Why is it not Raodine?
Wow. Wob.
Oh man, the audiobook. Okay, so in the graphic audio, they pronounce it Soul, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not Sully?
Wait.
Yeah.
We should save this for the episode.
Okay.
Yeah, because it occurred to me that I don't know if I've ever actually finished that particular piece.
Also, it's like,
Oh my
It's
god,
not worth-
Hope of Elantris is so I like Hope of Elantris. I also really like the
I
story
like it, I just-
about why he created it. Why he wrote it.
I didn't know there was one. I assumed there would be.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah, so it's the main character, 'cause
Sweetie, you're
I'm
gonna
just
have
gonna
to
tell you
save
now.
this from whenever we get to it.
So I'll say it
Naturally.
again when we get to it. But the main character is in Hope of Elantris is named after someone who was in Sanderson's wife's class when she was a middle school teacher, who did her project. This was when him and his wife were still dating before they got married. And she did her book report project on Elantris, and made this whole book actual
Oh.
book report on it, and turned this in as her project. And so Emily showed it to Brandon and was like, look at this, like what one of my students did, like isn't this awesome? And like the student actually ended up giving it to the project to them as a wedding gift when they got married.
Oh,
So
that's so sweet.
so he wrote the story Hope of Elantris with the main character being named after this student.
Oh, that's
So.
cute. Kind of
That
reminds
is
me
really
of
cool.
Rick Riordan's son, I think, or somebody wrote a short story that went into like one of the Demigod Diaries or short little sort of Ars Arcanum styles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get a quick drink of raw water and then I'm ready.
I thought he was gonna say ramen. I
I also heard ramen. So you're not alone there.
Okay.
That sounds nice. Podcasting with a nice bowl of ramen.
Slurping your noodles. Gotta say that for Yumi though.
Yeah, we should all have noodles when we do Yumi.
Heck yes.
Wait,
That's
we already
great.
did Yumi.
Whenever we eventually get around to rereading Yumi.
She's like, we already did Yumi.
Someday.
Because I'm looking at like.
all old and gray.
Yeah.
That's the best time to do
Well,
it.
let's see. We've got Elantris, the Emperor's Soul, Era 2, Warbreaker, Stormlight, then probably Era 3. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and we can decide when we want to do the secret projects, since they're not tied into any of the
Any of the
other
main story arcs.
Listen,
any of the
we'll
main
cross
story
this bridge once we're through with the Stormlight years.
Yeah, pretty much. The first half.
It'll probably take us 5 years to get through the first 5 Stormlight books.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
We may have to undergo a slight format adjustment.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get there.
We'll just do like a 12-hour stream. We'll bang out like a part at a time.
Yes.
Oh, and I talked to Kay recently, and basically she's got a new job now, so she can't be joining us at evenings typically. She says if she can, she will try, but she's finished university. Oh, not Kay, sorry, Juan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
Sorry.
like,
I was talking to Kay recently, or at least somebody pretending to be her.
That must have been so
Sorry,
surreal,
Juan.
Kay.
I'm sorry.
Damn it.
I was like, I have a new job. I was like, wait, what?
News
I
to
can't-
me.
Yeah.
How am I here?
Scooby-Doo ripping off the mask. What?
I was like, what?
I'm so sorry.
You're good.
Okay, I was talking to Juan recently, and she said she got a new job, and basically, due to that, she can't be staying up as crazy as she used to. But I'm gonna try to go see her one of these days.
That sounds cool.
Train over Paris.
Nice.
Well, I am in Baltimore. I could have swung by Kay's place.
It's kind of just like
All of a
crazy
sudden,
to
Kay gets
think.
a knock on the door. Okay.
Yeah, just give me a quick second. Takes an hour-long
Who's
drive.
that?
We've
Well, I
Are we
finished
ready?
Era 1, and we know what happened to Juan. That's exciting. Like, we had our own little
All the
setup and
mysteries.
payoff. Like,
That's true.
and we're back.
Okay. Everybody ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay.
As ready as I am right now.
Ready and super psyched.
Try to knock this
How
one out
ready
in, like,
is that, Kay?
I say that and none of y'all get what I'm referencing, and it makes me sad every time.
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Because it's a
Yeah.
Sanderson book.
I haven't read the
Wait, is it-
non-Cosmere ones.
Is it what the hell's her name?
The librarians?
No, it's it's from the Skyward novellas. It's
Oh, I
from the
haven't read
Skyward
those yet.
books.
Wait, have
Oh,
Oh, I did read those. Wait, what?
I'm not sure if I've read the novellas or not.
What's the... Wait, what are you... Repeat for me, Case.
as ready as I am right now,
Bless your stars.
which is what it's when says to FM and Rig will say to each other before they go on their like dual like mission. They're like, "Are you ready?" And it's like, "As ready as we are right now,"
Oh.
because like Rig is not at all ready whatsoever to go on this trip, but he's just
But he's
I don't
as ready
remember.
as he is.
Honestly, I didn't... Those short-lived stories, I was like... Okay, give me the good stuff.
I liked Star
Yeah.
City.
Which one was Star City?
Okay, you want to count us back in?
Okay. I reread Grand's words as like the defiant rose from Planet, and it
great.
still is awesome.
Oh, that's a great ending. I love that. Yeah.
I can't wait to see it. Honestly,
Yeah,
Brandon should start with Skyward as a movie.
I kind of feel like that part was a little bit of a shark jump, but whatever, it was funny.
I love boot
was
up
fun.
seats. I love power up seats. Like the ending to Skyward, just the first book, is like one of my favorite goosebumps 100%. Like when Spencer gets in Mbot and they're like, "Do you want to put the cloak back on?" She's like, "No, let him see we're coming." And like everything after it is like the coolest thing ever. It's like Maverick, Top Gun Maverick, when they get in the F-14. Please tell me I'm not the only. You
I
haven't seen Top Gun?
I also
Oh
haven't
my
seen it.
goodness. It's on like my top 10 list movies of all time. You gotta
I've
see
heard it's
Top
really
Gun
good,
Maverick.
but
I've
I've
heard
that
never
too.
been like a fighter movie guy.
It is exceptional. I have two friends who are in the movie.
Wow.
Mazel tov?
So I'm a Navy brat. So in San Diego, we live next to this guy, Sunshine Sinclair. He was in Top Gun. He's the guy who does the takeoff scene with Maverick as like he does his fist up in like the first 20 minutes. He's also one of the stunt pilots that they, make you think is Maverick for a lot of the scenes.
Wow, that's cool.
Cool.
And now we live in Norfolk, which has which has an airfield right in the backyard. And our new neighbors were also in the movie, and we actually had a whole movie night with the whole neighborhood. And like we stopped at one scene where they're at this like bar, and you can see him right there at one of the tables just drinking. Yeah. But back to Elantris. You gotta see Top Gun Maverick. 3, 2,